Let's take a look at Fareed Zakaria and a conversation with Joseph Robinette
Good to be
Biden.
with you. Thanks for having me.
When you go to the NATO Summit, the big strategic issue is that Ukraine wants membership in NATO. Should it get membership in NATO?
I don't think it's ready for membership in NATO, but here's the deal. I spent, as you know, a great deal of time trying to hold NATO together because I believe Putin has had an overwhelming objective from the time he launched 185,000 troops into Ukraine, and that was to break NATO. He was confident, in my view, and many of the intelligence community, he was confident he could break NATO. So holding NATO together is really critical. I don't think there is unanimity in NATO about whether or not to bring Ukraine into the NATO family now, at this moment, in the middle of a war.
Yeah. That'd be insane. They'd be like, all right, Article 5 time. They're like, that's the entire point of why they haven't done it. Is because they don't want nuclear war. I don't know why. Do people think that it just like went away or something? Like people just keep forgetting that. So then all of a sudden, every 6 months, they're just like, bring this back up. Every 6 months, they're like, hey, by the way, Ukraine should join NATO. Like they're in war right now. Croatia is the role model for Ukraine. Liberate all Ukraine as Croatia did. Oh. How did Croatia liberate all of itself? That's an interesting perspective. What's good, boys? Yeah, it's good to be back. I'm already fucking doing the news and shit. Yeah, I immediately got on. Fucking awful. Yeah, no, it's really bad. Like right here. Yeah, because it likes to punch me. That's what broke my rib. No, he's just slandering you.
For example, if you did that, then, you know, I mean what I say, we're determined to commit every inch of territory that is NATO territory. It's a commitment that we've all made no matter what. If the war is going on, then we're all in a war. You know, we're at war with Russia if that were the case. So I think we have to lay out a path, for the rational path, for Ukraine to be able to qualify to get into NATO. And we have, when the very first time I met with Putin 2 years ago in Geneva, and he said, I want commitments on no Ukraine in NATO. I said, we're not going to do that because it's an open door policy. We're not going to shut anybody out. NATO is a process that takes.
It's weird because it seems like you have shut Ukraine out. I wonder why. Like, oh, it's an open door policy, Jack, except for Ukraine because it's currently invaded by Russia. And that would mean nuclear war.
Some time to meet all the qualifications, and from democratization to a whole range of other issues. So in the meantime, though, I've spoken with Zelensky at length about this. And one of the things I indicated is the United States would be ready to provide, while the process was going on, and it's going to take a while that was going on, to provide security a la the security we provide for Israel, providing the weaponry, the need.
Damn, he said Allah provides security over Israel.
The capacity to defend themselves if there is an agreement, if there is a ceasefire, if there is a peace agreement. And so I think we can work it out, but I think it's premature to call for a vote, you know, in now, because there's other qualifications that need to be met.
Saying Ukraine is similar to Israel is wild, okay? Yeah, we gotta do we gotta do security in Ukraine just like we're doing in Israel. Thank God.
including democratization and some of those issues.
The short-term issue is at the NATO summit is Sweden. Will Sweden, do you think, are you optimistic that Sweden will be invited to join NATO relatively soon?
I am. I've met recently with the Swedish Prime Minister here. Sweden is has the same value set that we have in NATO, has a small nation, but has the capacity to defend itself, they know how to fight, and I think they should be a member of NATO. You know better than anyone, the holdup is Turkey. Turkey and Sweden.
Erdogan is so funny because he was like, yeah, I won't let you do it until you put a Quran in every single Swedish child's hands. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't say that. But he was like, you know what? I'll allow it if you like give us every Kurdish journalist you have inside your borders. And they were like, no. But then he was like, okay, I'll allow it if you start European Union inclusion talks for Turkey. And they were like, no. So then he literally was just like, all right, whatever, I'll just allow it as of today. So what happened? He also released a bunch of Azov guys back to Ukraine after telling Russia that they were going to stay there for the duration of the war. He's just been cucking Russia over and over again, dude. He's like, after getting support from Russia, after getting Russia to basically build like power plants and shit, after the whole like missile defense system saga, Erdogan has been riding NATO like the horniest little I don't know what kind of comparison I could do. My brain is shutting off a little bit.
Sweden is making adjustments in their law to relate to whether or not have people burning the Quran. Well, they aren't Swedes that are burning the Quran. They are immigrants who are burning the Quran, and that gives an excuse and/or puts Erdogan in a tough spot at home. And so they're moving to stop that.
He's not wrong, but most people don't use immigrant in that term. No, the main guy is a Danish dude. So he's not wrong. It's so funny. Yeah. The main Nazi that's doing the Quran burnings is a fucking Danish guy. So that's pretty funny that he just like dropped it like that, making it seem like, because when you talk about immigrants in Europe, like you're not talking about fucking Danes or whatever. You're talking about, oh, there was an Iraqi guy too, apparently. Really? But it's funny to bring it up like this, because like they're talking about Muslim immigrants for the most part.
Number one. Number two, Turkey is looking for modernization of F-16 aircraft, and Mitsotakis in Greece is also looking for some help. And so what I'm trying to, quite frankly, put together is a little bit of a consortium here where we're strengthening NATO in terms of the military capacity of both Greece as well as Turkey, and allow Sweden to come in. But it's in play. It's not done.
But you're hopeful.
I'm hopeful. Matter of fact, I'm optimistic.
You have news. The news is that the administration is going to provide cluster munitions to the Ukrainians. These are weapons that 100 nations ban, including some of our closest NATO allies. When there was news that the Russians...
All right, here. Jack, there's minefields here. I'm predicting what he's going to say. There's minefields that Russians put down. They're the ones who are using cluster munitions. We never said we won't use cluster munitions, Jack. And the best way to take over minefields and you know, destroy them is by deploying cluster munitions, Jack. Got to cluster bomb them.
Russians might be using it, admittedly, against civilians. Your then press secretary said this might be to constitute war crimes. What made you change your mind and decide to give them these weapons?
Two things, Fareed, and it was a very difficult decision on my part. And by the way, I discussed this with our allies, discussed this with our friends up on the Hill, and we're in a situation where Ukraine...
Yeah, I discussed it with the guys who are making the weapons. And they were like, we would love to sell you some.
Ukraine continues to be brutally attacked across the board by munitions, by these cluster munitions that have dud rates that are very, very low, I mean, very high, that are dangerous to civilians, number one. Number two, the Ukrainians are running out of ammunition. The ammunition that they call them 155 millimeter weapons. This
part I don't understand. Like, how? Someone who's like a big time Ukraine NATO Andy, please explain to me how. Are they like selling half of the weapons that immediately come in through the borders? Like, how is that physically possible? Especially against the sleeping bear that is the Russian forces, who American news media has said consistently since the first day of the invasion was underprepared and had no munitions. Like, how the fuck is Russia and all of the weapons that they have enough to keep eviscerating Ukrainian targets? Meanwhile, Ukraine keeps going through the most amount of fucking, like $150 billion worth of munitions. I don't understand it. Russians have run out of ammo and are using shovels. Source MI5. Yeah, well, that also doesn't make sense. You get that, right? Like, I don't understand how they have... What are they sitting on, the largest stockpile on the planet? This is all fodder because bottom line, if we whip it out, no doubt Russia going to follow suit this escalation. I mean, what are they going to do? Use cluster munitions? They have been using it since day one. But I don't understand how. How is Ukraine running out of bullets, man? How? How are they running out of ammo? How is that possible? They have the entire Afghan budget and times 2 now almost. Where are these guns going? That's all I'm asking. It doesn't make sense. Please, someone explain this budget to me, okay? Because it doesn't make sense. What's up, dude? What the fuck is that bag? Why did you make that? What the fuck?
This is a war relating to munitions and the running out of that ammunition, and we're low on it. And so what I finally did, took the recommendation of the Defense Department to, not permanently, but to allow for in this transition period where we get more 155 weapons, these shells for the Ukrainians, to provide them with something that has a very low dud rate. It's about I think it's 150, which is the least likely to be blowing, and it's not used in civilian areas. They're trying to get through those trenches and stop those tanks from rolling. And so, but it was not an easy decision, and we're not signatories to that agreement.
It's not bullets. You know, we don't have a shitload of artillery shells. Okay, I know it's not bullets. It's like when I call a sword a gun. Okay, don't be a semantics pervert. God damn it, every fucking NATO Andy is like this. It's not a gun. Yeah, I know. Shut up. Here's the thing. Okay? What I'm trying to say is this. How is Russia's depleted ass military, whose like frontline is populated by pedophile freaks and sex criminals, and then the rest of the military is just like dudes who are forced to go to war at gunpoint, conscripts. How is that fucking military, with how tiny of a fucking amount of money they have, able to withstand unlimited amounts of American ammo? It's not depleted, bro. When I say Russia's military is depleted, I mean I'm using what the Western media is saying. It makes no sense.
But it took me a while to be convinced to do it. But the main thing is they either have the weapons to stop the Russians now keep them from stopping the Ukrainian offensive through these areas, or they don't. And I think they needed them.
Let me ask you about China policy.
Recently,
there have been announcements of new restrictions on Chinese companies relating to cloud computing. The Chinese are now beginning to put restrictions in place on critical materials relating to semiconductors. When I travel around the world, the sense I get is people are wondering, where is this going? Is this a ratchet where the United States will keep doing things like this, the Chinese will start responding, and this goes on? Or do you think there's a kind of stable point here where US-China relations can be, as you have often said, competitive, but also, when necessary, cooperative?
The answer is, I think there's a stable point. But look, if you don't mind my saying, just before we went on air, we talked about things are changing around the world. China is in flux right now as well.
Sir, I actually played Call of Duty, and war never changes, sir. Yeah. Right.
China has enormous potential capacity.
Was that Fallout?
Enormous problems as well. And so there's two things that I have tried to do in terms of our China policy. And by the way, I have met person to person with Xi Jinping more than any other world leader. 68 hours alone, he and I, with an interpreter.
Damn, dude. They were fucking blowing each other's backs out, dude. The walls were sweaty by the end of it. 68 hours, back to back. God, I wish it were me. Xi Jinping alone in a room. My lord, dude. They were doing tantric shit. They busted open the fucking Kama Sutra book. They hit it from every angle. You know what I mean? Holy Lord.
Vice president all the way through, because as you remember, it was clear he was going to be president, and it wasn't inappropriate for the president of the United States, Barack Obama, to be traveling the world with him. But I traveled 17,000 miles with him when he was vice president in China. And so we understand each other, I think, fairly well, number one. Number two, everything's changing. You know, you've heard me say it before, the world's at an inflection point. No matter what was happening, China is in a different place right now. Internally. I'll give you an example. He often says to me, not often, he has on two occasions called me and said, why am I criticizing what's going on with in Western China and slave labor, et cetera. And I said, remember you told me that for China to be able to be secure, it needs to have one leader, a united China from Taiwan to the Tibetan Plateau. And that's when China has always done well, going all the way back to the time when we had emperors. And I said, and so for me not to talk about, and you told me for you not to talk about unity of China, would be, you wouldn't be able to lead. I said, well, United States is the most unique nation in the world. We are organized based on...
Yeah, uniquely racist. Fucking got him, dude. Let's go. Pack it up, boys. It's over.
idea, for real, and I only idea. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women are created equal, etc. We've never lived up to it, but we've never walked away from it. And for me, for American presidents to remain silent on slave labor would be totally inconsistent. And so I think what I'm trying to say is, I'm sorry to go on so long, is that I think there is a way to resolve, to establish a working relationship with China that benefits them and us. And the last thing I'll tell you on this is, I also called him after he had that meeting with the Russians with about...
Remember the 68 hours we had together? I sure do. The fuck are you doing now, huh? You think Putin can hit it as hard as I can? You think he can throw it back like I can? No. What are you doing? Putin is like fucking 5'3", okay? You saw him ride that horse shirtless and you said, I want some. Me next. We all did. Who amongst us didn't feel that way? Okay? We all did it. But you know, I'm here. I'm reliable. I got age, experience.
About this new relationship, et cetera. And I said, this is not a threat, this is an observation. I said, since Russia went into Ukraine, 600 American corporations have pulled out of Russia. And you've told me that your economy depends on...
Yeah? Is that what's going to happen? Yeah, you're going to pull out of China?
Investment from Europe and the United States. And be careful, be careful. And so
What did he say?
He listened, and he didn't argue. And if you notice, he has not gone full bore on Russia. He talks about, nuclear war would be a disaster. There is such a thing as security that's needed anyway. So I think there's a way.
Dude, this is old school politics, being like, I gave a veiled and rather empty threat, and that's why China behaved the way it's been behaving. That's old school politics. Trump literally lies all the fucking time. He's like, Xi Jinping loves me. He thinks I'm fucking sick. He wants me to also murder drug dealers, like he's murdering drug dealers, like all this shit. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's like, oh yeah, I got China to back off from Russia by doing an empty and veiled threat. It's stupid. Just, if you're going to do that, if you're going to do the anti-China posturing, you got to be xenophobic. Okay? You can't be out here talking about how great of a statesman you are. Okay? Companies are massively pulling away from China and moving to other Asian nations like Vietnam. Yeah, I know. The Chinese economy is over, folks. Tomorrow. Any moment now. It's also funny to look at Vietnam and be like, and Vietnam, a nation state. I mean, Vietnam hates China, but God, you should you know, I don't know, maybe look at what the Vietnamese politics are a little bit as well. Good thing you're moving away from. Good thing you're moving away from one Asian, quote unquote, ostensibly socialist nation to another one that's certainly not. Vietnamese government doesn't hate China. There's friendly progress. Okay.
We can work through this. And that's why I've spent so much time beefing up. I think if I told you 3 years ago, which I had written about in my notes, that I was going to get Japan deeply involved, have them change their defense budget, have them work with not that I've done it, but them work with South Korea, work something out. We're going to put together the Quad, which is India, Australia, the United States, and Japan. I got a call from on that. He said, "Why are you doing that?" I said, "We're not doing that to surround you. We're doing that to maintain stability in the Indian Ocean and in the South China Sea, because we believe the rules of the road about what constitutes international airspace, what constitutes international space in the water, should be maintained." And so I just think it's going to take a little time, and where it goes depends a lot on what he's able to do internally in terms of his economy.
Do you think he wants China to replace the United States as the leading power, the defining
Oh
power?
yeah, I think he does. I mean, you know, I'm confident he wants to have the largest economy in the world and have the largest military capacity in the world.
Rewrite the rules of the international order?
I think so. Not all of them, but he says, he pointed out to me, he said, we weren't there when those rules were written about international airspace and so on. And, but I don't think he's looking for war, conflict, expansion of territory. And
Based Dengist, Joseph Dengist Biden. They don't want international conflict. They don't want territorial expansion. Dude, all the fucking NATO Andes all the anti-China Redditors are going to fucking lose their minds when they hear this. They're going to get so mad.
I sometimes say to my colleagues, I've spent over 180 hours talking with my NATO colleagues and European colleagues in person or on Zoom. I say to them, do you know any world leader who would trade places with Xi Jinping? Okay, I'll take their problems, you take mine. I don't know anybody who would, because it's not that he's a bad guy or a good guy. The circumstances are enormously complicated. For example, you know, the whole notion of, you know, this new ring road that's going to put around, you're going to invest in other nations. Well, it's ended up producing dead in a noose, you know, these countries.
Artillery ammo is short because the past 50 years, the U.S. doctrine went under the assumption that volume of artillery fire wouldn't be important because it also assumed air superiority. Russia is drawing from old Soviet stocks that were orders of magnitude larger than NATO's. Isn't Fox going to have a field day with his Biden defense China? I mean, I don't even hate the way he's speaking about this. Because he's not like entirely incorrect in the way that he's speaking about, like, obviously China's interest in the global economy, where they want to be, where they're going towards, and what their interests are, especially because he's like, weirdly enough, this is a very sober assessment of China's interests. And he hasn't turned around and been like, Xi Jinping is a dictator, Jack. He wants to fuck and suck every single person around the world, Jack. Like, it's normally whenever someone talks about China, they either glaze up China, not myself, obviously, or they just ride China so fucking hard, like China is the worst country on the planet. Every Chinese person is technically there to, you know, a double agent that wants to kill you, that sort of shit.
Are in real ring road that's going to put around, you're going to invest in other nations.
The ring road.
It's ended up producing dead in a noose. You know, these countries are in real trouble. And so, but it requires us to be more responsible. The West, I've been pushing very hard to get our European colleagues to invest in infrastructure in Africa, in South America, to generate the kind of growth that they should have and could have, because we're the ones that caused.
He's saying it's turned into a news because of debt relief, like because China is engaging in loans not coming to fruition and then just offering debt relief. That's why he's saying it's like, it doesn't make sense, Jack. Why are they not implementing austerity measures as they control the entire country? That's not how this works.
The environmental problems, we clear cut everything. And now we're telling them, no, everybody slow up. But I guess what I'm saying is, I think there are positive answers to the dilemmas that exist without worrying about whether or not China is going to rule the world.
What will it take for Bibi Netanyahu to get an invitation to the White House?
Well, first,
damn, Fareed, why are you asking it like that? He's asking like he's like, Bibi's been hitting me up, President Biden. He's very disappointed that you have not extended an invitation to him.
first of all,
was there any mention of Taiwan during that? No. He believes his debt relief with respect to China, then how are we supposed to believe that he was ever good faith about getting rid of student debt? What? Dude, that's two entirely separate things, okay? I can't believe you turned Joe Biden's foreign policy and his assessment on like Chinese One Belt, One Road initiatives and all the loans that they have recognized will not be paid off and engage in debt relief to Joe Biden's own personal capabilities. They did mention China being ruled by a single person from Taiwan to the west. Yeah, but he didn't talk about it in negative terms.
he
just said Xi Jinping believes that China needs to be ruled by one person all the way from Taiwan to the west, which is true. That is what Xi Jinping's take is. That's not a secret.
Israeli president is going to be coming. We have other contacts. I've been, I think it's fair to say, an unyielding supporter of Israel for I've only been around a couple of years, but for as long as I've been around. And Bibi, I think, is trying to work through how we can work through his existing problems in terms of his coalition.
What?
He has.
Joe Biden's so old. He gave he was the one who fucking drew the Palestinian maps, dude. Motherfucker, I've been around for a couple of years, Jack. I don't know if he's like joking or not. I don't understand what he's trying to say there.
I'm one of those who believes that Israel's ultimate security rests in a two-state solution. I think it's a mistake to think that as some members of his cabinet, and this is one of the most extreme members of cabinets that I've seen. I go all the way back to Golda Meir and all, you know, and not that she was extreme, but I go back to that era. I think that the fact that the Palestinian Authority has lost its credibility, not necessarily because.
Yeah, I wonder why. Wait, oh, what? Oh, come on. The Palestinian Authority hasn't lost its credibility because of what Israel's doing?
Just because it's just lost its credibility.
Yeah, just on its own. How did that happen? How did the Palestinian how did that happen? How did they lose their credibility, I wonder? He's like, just because it lost its credibility. You know, I love American leaders and their foreign policy perspectives, because it's like, it goes back to like, they hate us because they ain't us type shit. You know what I mean? It's like, why did Osama bin Laden strike the towers? How did that happen? What were the reasons? Because they hate us. You know, why did the Iraqi citizens, take up arms against American invading forces? Oh, because they hate us, because they hate our freedoms. Why did the Palestinian Authority lose its influence over the Palestinian population? It just kind of happened on its own. Not because of what Israel has done, and not because of like the Palestinian Authority being seen as like a Palestinian face to the Israeli occupational forces violence.
The fact that the Palestinian Authority has lost its credibility, not necessarily because of what Israel's done, just because it's just lost its credibility.
It absolutely is because of what Israel has done and what the Palestinian Authority has done on top of that. The reason why Palestinians do not like the Palestinian Authority is because they see it as a branch of the Israeli government at this point.
Number one. And number two, created a vacuum for extremism among the Palestinians. The PLA, there's some very extreme elements.
Yeah, how did that happen? Another question. It's like, how did that happen? Oh, they're just extreme like that. They're just radical, dude. They're like, yeah, that's right. Again, this kind of radicalism or even like fundamentalist sects growing in size and popularity can only happen because of what Israel is doing. Their endless conquest, their endless bloodshed has forced these people into a corner. That's it. It is so profoundly stupid. Now, of course, I do believe that Biden and every other foreign policy person understands that. I think they understood it in Afghanistan. I think they understood it in Iraq. I think they understood it in Israel as well. They're just paid to not understand it. They're paid to say the exact opposite of what the reason is.
So it's not all Israel now in the West Bank, all Israel's problem, but they are part of the problem.
That's insane. Off topic, but apart, Spanish Twitch community is losing their mind over you because some Twitch streamers saw you at TwitchCon and say you're the hottest guy on the platform. N.A.T.O, really? Oh, I wish we hung out. I didn't get to hang out with a lot of Spanish streamers at all this time.
And particularly those individuals in the cabinet who say they have no right to, we can settle anywhere we want, they have no right to be here, etc. And I think we're talking with them regularly, trying to tamp down what's going on, and hopefully Bibi will continue to move toward moderation and changing the court.
You've had tough words about Saudi Arabia from the start about the Khashoggi killing and things like that. You talked about needing a kind of new relationship. They've been pretty unyielding when you've asked them to pump more oil. They've slashed oil recently. Now Saudi Arabia wants a defense treaty from the United States, promising that you will protect them, and they want civilian nuclear capacity, which again, the US would have to provide. And in return, they would recognize Israel. Are you going to do it?
We're a long way from there. We got a lot to talk about. For example, that trip I went, which was criticized for my going, a number of things have happened on that trip. On that trip, I was able to negotiate overflights of Israeli aircraft can now overfly Saudi Arabia, number one.
That's weird. That's crazy. I can't believe two of our most important allies are aligned with one another. Wow. Shocking.
Number two, the price of oil is actually down, not up. And it's not because they have done one thing or the other, but the world's changing. Our policies relative to renewables are real. Number three, we found ourselves in a circumstance where the war in Yemen is essentially for a year now it's ended. Now, the peace is being kept. So we're making progress in the region, and it depends upon the conduct and what is asked of us for them to recognize Israel. Quite frankly,
You're a deeply unserious person if you look to what's going on in Palestine and go, the real issue is our other allies in the region, like the Gulf states, not fully recognizing Israel. I'm sorry. That is objectively identical to what the Trump administration said. That is objectively identical to what the Trump administration did. That is what Jared Kushner did. you might as well still have Jared Kushner in office, okay, in a position of power. It is mind-boggling to me that a Democratic, supposedly quote-unquote progressive president can go on television and say the identical things that Trump said and do the identical things that Trump did. It's wild how quickly things can change as far as the ratchet effect goes. Okay? Because when Jared Kushner was doing the shit that he was doing in Israel, all the liberals were united in dunking on him. Obviously, that was bullshit. At the end of the day, they didn't give a fuck. But moving the embassy to Jerusalem and a recognition of the reason why Israel feels so comfortable doing additional violence in the West Bank now is because of the Trump administration's actions. At the time, the Biden administration, or not the Biden administration, but the Democrats were like, oh, this is kind of not the best thing to do, I think. Please, let's not do that. Meanwhile, he's just, building on top of that same policy and reinforcing it. It's just so stupid.
I don't think they have much of a problem with Israel, quite frankly. And whether or not we would provide a means by which they could have civilian nuclear power and or be a guarantor of their security, I think that's a little way off.
Finally, Mr. President, you've often said when people ask you about your age, just watch me. And I think a lot of people do watch you and are impressed, and they think you've been a great president. You've brought the economy back. You've restored relations with the world. But many of these people do say, and these are ardent supporters of yours, the next thing he should do is step aside and let another generation of Democrats take the baton. Why are they wrong?
Well, let me, not right or wrong. Look, to use the phrase again, I think we're at an inflection point. I think the world is changing, and I think there is one thing.
He said,
It comes with age if you've been honest about it your whole life, and that is some wisdom. I think we're on the cusp of being able to make significant positive changes in the world. Really, honest to God, do.
Dude, any moment now, I'm just going to go back on the things that I was not capable of doing, even though I did have the capacity to do so, just didn't have the enthusiasm, and I'm going to do them. Any minute now, guys, just you wait, okay? It's coming. It's coming. I've already impressed so many people. I'm going to impress even more people, okay?
You see what we've done in Europe.
Meanwhile, the only thing that it has been true is not necessarily Biden's campaign promises when he was out and speaking to the public. The only promise that he made that came true was at the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. And if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe. For $5 or for free, Jack, you can subscribe. You can also get gifted a sub if you're lucky, Jack. Cut the malarkey. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. Okay, the only promise that he made that he actually fulfilled wasn't the top of the hour ad break. That's my promise, and I've been fulfilling it. The only promise he made that he fulfilled was that nothing will fundamentally change. Remember when Biden said that? Not in an open door meeting, not to, union members or anything like that, but to Wall Street financiers. Because that was the real campaign promise, because that was, in that closed door meeting that he had, those were his real constituents who he cares about. David Hellman, thank you for the 5 gifted subs, allowing 5 people to no longer see the ads at the top of the hour. Yo, why is your camera exposure so blown out? It's because your mom's back is blown out by me and my penis. I'm having sexual intercourse with your mom, okay? Some of you need to stop worrying about my camera exposure being so blown out and worry about your mother's backs being blown out by me, okay? Shut the fuck up. I'm not going to sit here and try to fix it right now. I literally got off of a goddamn fucking plane, 10-hour plane ride, and immediately got in a fucking Uber to my house and sat the fuck down and have been streaming. There are going to be some issues. Okay? I'm sorry that it's not 100% literally fucking perfect. Everything that you see on camera, I can see as well. Bahaha, so your job, no sexist on law, get a new comeback, bro. Okay. Yeah, if you want to worry about my comeback, ask your mom. Okay? Ask your mom. She has all my cum. You can get it back from her. Oh, fuck. Oh, my God. My rib hurts.
Europe's more
My ribs are blown up. Harder than your mom's back.
united than it's ever been since World War II, into World War II. You see what we've been able to do in the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea. We've united that part of the world, including the basically 50 island nations that are participating. They're going to be here, by the way, shortly. I think we're putting the world together in a way that is going to make things significantly, how can I say it, more secure for people. We're uniting democracies, have the possibility of uniting democracies in a way that hadn't happened ever. And so I think that whether it's the Far East, whether it's NATO, whether it's Europe, whether it's what's going on in Africa, I think we have enormous opportunities. And I think I just want to finish the job. And I think we can do that in the next 6 years.
Mr. President, it's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Oh, by the way, here's the update.
NATO leaders are gathering in Lithuania ahead of a two-day summit which begins tomorrow. The meeting in Vilnius will tackle a wide range of topics, but it's the discussions over Ukraine's future membership of NATO that will dominate. It's being reported that Washington and Berlin have agreed a form of words for the summit's concluding statement that does not fully endorse a pathway to Ukraine's NATO membership, nor does it talk about joining once the war is over. A point which is widely supported by Ukraine's staunchest allies. President Biden arrived in Vilnius a short time ago, ready to take part. We'll be looking this evening at what lies ahead, but let's go first to Vilnius and speak to Lewis Vaughan-Jones, our colleague who is there. How much of a problem do you think the German and American view on Ukraine joining NATO, Lewis, is going to be at the summit? Is it going to overhang all discussions?
Stressing the importance of a direct, concrete, focused commitment to joining.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Great stuff. He was really on fire right there. Those first few moments were just popping, dude.
To Ukraine joining NATO. There's an acceptance on all sides. Of course, this won't happen whilst there is a war going on, whilst there is conflict, but directly at the end of that, Zelensky's been absolutely clear that is the commitment that he is looking for, and anything less than that is certainly won't be well received in Kyiv. And this whole issue of membership will focus so many minds here, because it's not just Ukraine, which of course is the single most important one, but also Sweden, which today we took Turkey's President Erdogan to really raise the stakes effectively, throwing in an extra demand before he said he would open the door to Sweden.
I basically explained all of this to you guys earlier. Like, Turkey was like, only if you let us, jail every Kurdish journalist. Sweden was like, no. And then they were like, well, you got, people burning Qurans. You can't do that. And then Sweden was like, no. And then they were like, okay, let us into EU and we'll think about it. And then EU was like, no. So now they're like, all right, never mind. We're just going to do it. We're going to pass it through. Fuck it.
Joining NATO. Just very quickly to remind you, NATO works in a way that anyone who is in the club can effectively block any new members from joining, and that is what is potentially happening here with Turkey and Sweden. And today Erdogan said Well, if you open the door to Turkey joining the EU, a totally separate organisation, then we can open the door to Sweden joining NATO. And that has been...
You would have held out on the EU membership shit a little longer. Yeah, it's never happening. If you think the European Union is going to allow a Muslim nation with 100 million Muslims into its borders, well, I don't know what to tell you, but like, it's just not fucking happening. There is just no shot. Look at every European country right now. Look at every country inside of the EU. Like, every single one is going crazy mode with Muslim immigrants. Especially fucking a country like Sweden, especially, is like funny when you think about like the Muslim immigration narrative taking root. It's not about being Muslim, just the population and GDP, too much power balance change. You are on crack cocaine if you think that a country with the power and size and geopolitical interests as Turkey was a Christian country. And none of that Orthodox shit either. But fuck it, even Orthodox, okay? You are delusional if you think that the EU wouldn't be falling head over heels to fucking allow a country like that immediately in. Come on. It has everything to do with Islam. Literally everything. It's the cultural differences between an Islamic nation like Turkey and the other nations.
Dismissed by some, saying completely separate organisations. But there is a sense of frustration too. I spoke to a couple of senior and powerful US senators who are here in Vilnius, and they both used the word disappointing to describe this development today from Erdogan. Let's take a listen.
It's disappointing to hear President Erdogan putting something else on his list, but Turkey's an important member of NATO. I'm hoping that President Erdogan is going to rethink his...
There's also the autocratic problem. No, the fuck, come on, man. Please look at the history of the European Union. Like, no, there is no fucking autocratic problem. This isn't to say that Erdogan is not an autocrat. He is. They don't give a fuck, dude. They do not give a fuck. Viktor Orban. You know what I mean? There's no... It's just Islam. Please, guys. Please.
His requests, and that he's going to be able to negotiate with the other leaders at the summit an agreement, because Sweden brings important capacity, particularly in the maritime arena and in the Arctic region, that we really need in NATO.
Senator Tillis, your reaction, surprised?
Disappointed, not surprised. But I think that what we have to look at are things that are relevant to Sweden's accession into NATO. They have an extraordinary military. They've got a great industrial base. They have capabilities that will be helpful in the Arctic and the Baltic.
It's like, why? Why is a guy with that accent talking about the Arctic and the Baltic? Motherfucker said NATO.
There's so many reasons to vote for their accession. I don't see how things not related to their application to NATO being mixed into the negotiations, and hopefully it'll work itself out. I also don't want to miss the opportunity to thank Turkey for the partnership that we have with them, for the investment that they made in Afghanistan. There are many good things. They're a member of the NATO family. We just want to make the family bigger, and that's why we want Sweden in NATO as quickly as possible.
Confirmation, Lewis, in the last few minutes that Joe Biden will meet with President Erdogan tomorrow to discuss Sweden. Can we talk about another issue, and that is weapons supply? Because there's been a lot of reporting on the sidelines of this summit about the gulf between commitments that have been made on weapons and what has actually been delivered. And Joe Biden seemed to intimate today.
Listen, you guys know what my perspective on NATO is, okay? From its inception, it's been dog shit. Not a good thing. It's a bad thing. And its greatest supporter is not Joe Biden. It's Vladimir motherfucking Putin. Okay? Sorry. I've been saying this since fucking day one. The moment that he invaded Ukraine, he became NATO's #1 guy. Okay? Say bad take all you want. Don't give a fuck. Europe is too tolerant to ban a country for having a different religion. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, dude, Europe, famously tolerant. Religion is way weaker in influencing culture and politics in EU countries than in Turkey. God. Brother, it's not like a war between Catholicism and Protestantism and Islam, okay? When Europeans are making these decisions, they're not making it on the virtue of like the Holy Crusades, dumbass. What the fuck are you talking about? I'm not saying that they're like, oh, there's sectarian infighting, which there is, by the way, still. I mean, look at Ireland. But again, that's another incredible fucking, there's another incredible opportunity to reinforce that same thing. Ireland is more about land rights and colonial violence. Just like turning around and saying like, fuck these Muslims coming into our borders is not actually fought on the basis of like religious differences. Okay? They just think they're different. They're not the same. They think that their culture is barbaric.
Day that yes, there are shortages for Ukraine at the front line, but there are also shortages in the American arsenal as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And to add an extra layer of confusion here, Christian, of course, we're talking about two different supply mechanisms. You have individual.
In France, the religious differences are really important, though. No, it's not even. No, it's never actually a genuine theological reason. Okay, it's not a theological disagreement. Please stop. Bullshit. It's just another patina for having some kind of xenophobic, bigoted perspective. That's it. Brother, if you think it's a fucking genuine religious difference, okay, I don't know what to tell you. If you think that there's any sort of serious cultural differences, literally talk to a dude from Istanbul and then talk to a dude who was grown up in a fucking rural farm area of France, okay? To a motherfucker from Paris, there are very little differences between a dude who was born and raised in Paris versus a dude who was born and raised in fucking Istanbul, okay? I've said this before. I've gone all around America. I grew up in Istanbul and Ankara, okay? These were big cities. They are big cities. And you have more in common with a person living in a fucking big cosmopolitan city than you do that's like significantly far away with a different religion and everything, okay? You have way more in common with someone like that than you do with your own fellow citizens that are living in fucking rural-ass Oklahoma. Doesn't matter.
Countries giving their various bits of equipment, which inevitably may then lead to potential areas of shortfalls in their own supply. And then, of course, there's gifts by NATO itself trying to come up with a more strategic approach in what it supplies to Ukraine. And it's really trying to bring these two supply chains together. That's part of the negotiations here and has been in place for a while, actually. Madrid, the last big summit here, outlined.
Istanbul does not equal Turkey. Yeah, Alabama doesn't equal fucking America either. Okay, shut the fuck up, dumbass. I hate that. It's just like so stupid. I agree with almost all of your takes, but the NATO turn, I don't understand. Yeah, because you don't understand the history of NATO, why it was built, why it was designed, how it was implemented. And that's right. It's okay. You have been fed a lie about NATO being a protector of all things good. And I assume that there's also a level of like fear that you have that America has to be the hegemonic superpower. You know what I mean? What did you learn that finally made you anti-NATO? I'm Turkish. NATO has been involved in Turkish politics as well in an identical capacity to Gladio in Italy. So, you know,
Find a broad strategic goal and plan, and part of the discussions here will be seeing exactly how progress is being made and how things are progressing on that front. You mentioned
America has to be the hegemonic superpower. The alternative is worse. Stop coping. Overdosing on pills. Yeah, it has to be. You're right. I mean, one immediate answer I have to you is that all of these European social democracies partially greatly benefited from the USSR being there because dominant capitalist forces had to capitulate to socialist and trade unionist movements because they wanted to say, hey, there's a reasonable middle ground here because, like, oh my God, we don't want you to be fully a vassal state of the USSR. So even all of those things that a lot of European Eurocucks take for granted, like healthcare, that they fucking flex over Americans on a regular basis, came at a time when there was some level of multipolarity. So shut the fuck up, okay? Maybe you don't know. Maybe it's not that. Maybe you're just used to America being the hegemonic superpower. And even it was even back then, but there was with no alternative whatsoever. And you're just fearful that it'll be different. First time seeing live, you don't go to the bathroom as much. Yeah, well, my haters act like I'm always off camera and I'm playing videos, but that's not the reality. Anyway.
weapons, so we should probably mention too a controversial issue of cluster bombs will no doubt be brought up. But just before I head back to you, Christian, just want to flag up to you that these big screens behind me, you can see Jens Stoltenberg giving a press conference, so we wait to hear what he says.
Lewis, thank you very much for that. Well, en route to Lithuania, President Biden spent most of the day here in the UK, where he met the King for the first time since the coronation. The palace said the two men spoke about the environment, a topic on which they presumably find a lot of common ground. But the environment is not one of Rishi Sunak's 5 priorities. Instead, discussions at Downing Street this afternoon concentrated largely on Ukraine and China. There have been 1 or 2 disagreements of late, which we'll discuss in the company of Amanda Renteria, who is with us, former campaign director for Hillary Clinton, and Colonel Brendan.
Oh my God, what the fuck? Yo, what the fuck is this? That's a pensioner, but too much fun. In Antalya, okay? Yes. I've just come back from Bodrum in Turkey. And let me tell you, it was a wonderful experience. Yes. The sun was shining, as you can see.
With us as well, the former Chief of Staff for the US Marine Corps. Thank you very much for being with us. Amanda, just before you landed here in London, CNN ran an article today saying that after Brexit, under Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, the UK had become just so needy. There wasn't the time to deal with the UK's issues within the White House. Do you sense from watching those pictures today at Downing Street that there is a better relationship developing?
Absolutely. And, you know, Biden, when he shows up in the room, this is his gift. He has a really great relationship, a building rapport, and you've seen him over time, one after another. When the relationship forms, he comes back again, works through it. This trip has been quite the moment for Biden, not simply with relationships with allies, convincing those who might not be as close allies, but also the delegation that is coming from the United States there as well. There really is this sense of coordination and planning together that we haven't seen in a long time here in the States, but really speaks well to what Biden does best, which is bring those things together, really build that kind of relationship. And that's true this morning as well.
Brendan Kearney, we know that the UK wasn't in favour of sending the cluster bombs, neither was Germany, neither was Canada. There are deep splits over this within NATO, but the Europeans in particular can't be too critical of the United States because, as Lewis was just setting out, there are such problems in supply of arms to the front line at the moment.
Well, Christian, you're exactly right, and again, what adds complexity to this.
Oh, he's not British. God damn, I thought he was a real fucking. I thought he was a straight up gammon, dude. I thought this was like. That's crazy. This is actually shocking. Okay. He's way too red to be an American. He looks like a pensioner. He looks like he wore a Speedo the entire summer trip.
That we all face is that it's a Ukrainian request to use these weapons on Ukrainian soil, with the implications that in addition to Russian casualties, you're going to have the unintended consequences of Ukrainian casualties. That's the bad part about these little bomblets. They tend to be picked up by children. They tend to hang around for a while because they're so small. And yeah, this is a tough one, but I think all the countries respect the U.S. opinion. They're going to criticize it, as they should, but it's not going to change it.
No. Obviously, it's a two-day meeting in Vilnius in Lithuania. 31 countries are going to be joining, but the issue very much focused on Ukraine and Sweden. You're watching BBC News. Just saying goodbye to our world viewers, but I want to continue the conversation with Amanda Renteria and Brendan Kearney. Amanda, this issue of Ukraine's membership clearly came out of the blue for a lot of the allies over the weekend. The French president, who wasn't inclined to support it initially, now thinks that it's the only way to deter future Russian aggression. What do you think will be in the president's mind? Why has he decided that now is not the time?
Well, he's had a long conversation, and you can feel that the team itself has been working through what do we do now, not only around cluster munitions, but how do we bring different countries along to what our path is going forward. This is quite sensitive for Biden. He has talked a lot about how fast you can move in a moment like this. Not only are you hearing a coordinated effort by Biden's messaging, but he's also brought an entire delegation to bring them into the discussion, not simply what happens here, but really what implications that has going forward as a path gets set. But one piece to that communication from the very beginning, from Biden and talking with leaders here in the United States, was that they would be very clear on the path forward, but be very sensitive that we don't push anything into a World War III. He has said that from the beginning. He has stayed with it. Now what you're beginning to see is a widening of the conversation so that every step from here is more coordinated and thoughtful as things become more intense. And the first big test to that was the decision to go forward with cluster munitions.
Some important breaking news that I can maybe put to you, Brendan Kearney. We just heard from AFP, and this is coming from the Secretary General Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General, that President Erdogan has agreed to back Swedish NATO accession to the alliance. Your reaction to that, what will they bring to the alliance? Why was it so important they got this over the line?
Well, and that is good news. The Swedes have long possessed one of the most professional militaries in all of Europe, if not the world. They've got a great industrial base. They're extremely innovative when it comes to weapon systems.
Entirely Vladimir Putin's fault. Like, 100%. They had a dual partnership with Finland and a long-standing neutrality against Russia. Not only did Vladimir Putin invade Ukraine which put the fear of God in these other countries. But then he also invaded it in a way that showed demonstrably that they do not have the military capabilities to conduct a wholesale on the ground war against Finland or any of these other nations. So they showed their hand, and guess what? They showed that it was weak. So when that happened, of course they were going to fucking join NATO. What are you, crazy? Vladimir Putin is NATO's greatest ally. 100%. This is why I say what I've been saying.
Especially with high tech. So, and again, their access to the Arctic, that has been a real challenge for NATO here for a while, with the noise and the actions of Russia in the Arctic, and also the noise that the Chinese have started to make, questionably as to why they'd be interested, but they want to get up there too. So the accession of Sweden into NATO is really a plus across many, many different spectrums in terms of what they will bring to NATO. That is nice. It's nice to be able to comment on some good news every once in a while, Christian.
I told you like this. NATO is a protection racket, right? So what does the mafia do? They first try to create a need for the protection racket. They break your windows. And then they come in and they say, oh man, your storefront is ruined. Can't believe someone did that. You should work with us and we'll defend you. Except with Putin, he's the one who actually did break the fucking windows. And he did it in such a bitch-made way that there was no threat for Finland or Sweden to join NATO. That's what he did. He legitimized the NATO position. He galvanized the NATO generals and all the fucking fear-mongering that they've engaged in to justify NATO's existence. And he handed it to them on a fucking silver platter.
Amanda Renteria, did the White House have leverage over President Erdogan? I noticed that when the National Security Advisor spoke on Friday, he was very clear that they couldn't give any guarantees that Sweden were going to be allowed in. So what has changed over the weekend?
I think you had a lot of conversations behind the scenes, not simply from Jake and national security advisors and others, but you began to see a lot more conversations as a whole from other members of Congress who are sitting in powerful seats as well. And so there was a full court press going on, not only publicly with the press briefing, but also behind the scenes at all different levels. And this has been the ongoing conversation. So huge news for President Biden. He went in hoping this would happen, but the administration was very careful not to get ahead of the news and to make sure they walked carefully to get to the result that we have today, or we just heard about.
To viewers who are joining us around the world, breaking news in the last few minutes coming from Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, that Sweden will be allowed to join NATO. President Erdogan has given his blessing to Sweden's accession. Of course, that was the main sticking point, the veto that Turkey had over Sweden's accession bid. But it seems, according to AFP in the last few minutes, that President Erdogan has indicated to the American side that he will approve that accession when they meet in the next 2 days. Let's go to Vilnius and speak to Lewis Vaughan-Jones, who is there. Lewis, breaking news in the last few minutes. Why do you think this has happened? What is it that has finally got it over the line?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, Christian? Just as I was finishing up talking to you a few minutes ago, Jens Stoltenberg started speaking on the screens there, and we got a whisper to have something to do with Sweden, and we got that formal confirmation. Interesting point of detail here, which we do need to reflect, is that President Erdogan can't make the decision on his own. He now refers it on to Parliament.
Yeah, famously, they will go against his wishes on when the fucking opposition coalition literally ran on how much better their relationship was going to be with NATO. Like, his own party does whatever the fuck Erdogan wants them to do. And even the opposition's running point was that they were going to have better relationships with the West and with NATO.
Parliament in Turkey has to then pass it, but he has agreed to work with Parliament to make sure that does happen. And it's interesting when you look at some of the potential issues that Erdogan had previously raised, things like the PKK, a group that he and many view as a terrorist organisation, saying that actually Sweden wasn't doing enough to counter groups and individuals like that. There's issues around things like F-16s, fighter jets, which is want to resume purchasing from the US. And then just earlier on today, with the issue of joining the EU, a totally separate organisation, was thrown up into the mix as well. So all those issues feeding into the potential delay in accession, but we don't know the details of what exactly has been resolved and how, but it does now seem that Sweden will go the way of Finland and join. And you remember that both those countries started this process at the same time. And I spoke to the Finnish foreign minister just a few hours ago, and she told me that she always viewed this very much as a joint process. It was Sweden and Finland had to join before the whole process was finished, and it seems now, it looks like we're nearly there.
It's worth making the point, it's pretty obvious, Lewis, but the motive, President Putin's motive for going to war was to stop the advance of NATO towards Russia's borders. And since the expanded invasion began in February last year, Finland and now Sweden have joined. So in many ways it has backfired.
That's certainly the view amongst so many here. And interestingly, I asked the Finnish foreign minister, who, by the way, has only been in her job 3 weeks, quite a baptism, quite a welcome to the job. But I asked her about specifically having that border, 800 miles or so, with Russia, and what difference it makes being part of NATO now. And interestingly, her answer was reflecting on, really, we're quite used to this. You know, we are a country that is well equipped to monitoring and dealing with the threat and potential threat from Russia, and suggesting that they, therefore, are very well placed to play a very key part and a very important role militarily, intelligence-wise, in NATO. And always she emphasised that that role comes jointly with Sweden.